discuss what is the level of significance. But before I start, here are the table of contents under Group 2. Number 1 is definition of the level of significance. Number 2 is how to determine the level of significance. And number 3, level of significance and the hypothesis testing. And the last is practical exercises. And now, let's discuss what is the level of significance. So, the significance level, also known as a alpha or in that symbol, is a measure of the strength of the evidence that must be present in our sample before you will reject the null hypothesis and conclude that the effect is statistically significant. The researcher determines the significance level before concluding the experiment. So, the level of significance is the probability of rejecting the null hypothesis when it is true. So, for example, the significance level of 0.05, it indicates a 5% risk of concluding that a difference exists when there is no actual difference. So, if the level of significance is low, it indicates that we need stronger evidence before we reject the null hypothesis. So the researcher will go to decide what level of significance they will use. So typically, the values of alpha that are frequently used are 0.01, 0.05, 0.10, which implies the 0.01 into 1%, 0.05 into 5%, 0.10 and to 10%. So there is a probability that we can reject the null hypothesis, but it depends on what we need to use when we are selecting values of alpha in our research study. So take note that hypothesis testing refers to the process of making inferences or educated guesses about a particular parameter. So when we say educated guesses, the hypothesis testing because it provides thoughts or suggestions on what the conclusion is going to be, but it takes in a certain data. This can either be done using a statistic in sample data, or it can be done based on uncontrolled observational study. When we say observational study, it means we are looking for more information on studying the evidence. That's why we have two types of errors. A type 1 error committed to alpha is known as a false positive and occurs when a researcher incorrectly researches a true null hypothesis. In another word, if the null hypothesis is true and we reject it, you have an incorrect decision. While the type 2 error committed to beta is known as a false negative and occurs when a researcher fails to reject a false null hypothesis. If the null hypothesis is false and we fail to reject it, your decision is correct. And easy to understand, if the null hypothesis fails to reject, it is statistically significant. And if the null hypothesis is accepted, it is not statistically significant. For example, you decide to get tested for COVID-19 based on mild symptoms. Two errors could potentially occur. So the answer is the type 1 error, the false positive. The test result says you have coronavirus but you don't, because the null hypothesis is true based on the evidence which is in the test result, but you denied it to reject. Type 2 error, false negative. The test result says you don't have coronavirus but you actually do, because the null hypothesis is false, which is you are not infected. Thank you for letting your time to watch. I hope this discussion will help you to understand the level of